Okay, so again, just to repeat the apologies from the authors for not being able to attend. So this paper is about trying to figure out from your social media traces something about your approach to learning. Okay, so what do they do? Well, look at semantic enrichment on engagement, analysis and user modeling, adaptive systems, all this kind of thing. So the path for this paper is looking at the semantic enrichment that you can get from the social web, looking at analyzing those traces, taking those traces into adaptive systems, and then influencing the e-learning. Okay? So, the bit that, the reason I'm doing this is it's part of the I Am Real project. And we're an EU FP7 project looking at augmenting learning experience in simulators with experiences from real life. Okay, so our idea is to try and increase the fidelity of the experience inside simulators. So what's the scenario for this particular work? Well, we have new learners coming to a system. What we used to do is we go, okay, here's your learning, bosh. These days, our learners participate in a wide variety of social media. So we can adapt using these kind of contextual cues that we get as people leave digital traces throughout their use of social media. So the goals of the work are to take initial user profiles and make them more complex. Okay, so we leverage all of these cues, these traces within social media to build a more complex picture of the learner as they approach the learning environment. So it's a building up of context. What is meant by context in the paper? Well, we've got the social web, we've got Twitter, we've got Flickr. So the vision is that a user of TEL is asked about their username. So, you know, who are you on Flickr, Twitter, what's your LinkedIn profile, this kind of thing. We suck all that information up and we use that as the basis for some of the adaptation systems that we're building into e-learning. So previously, some of the work that's been done by the authors has focused on adaptation through first using user location to inform cultural stereotypes and user learning styles. The location and cultural stereotypes has gone on to inform simulators that have been training in intercultural awareness. So we said, okay, where are you, where have you been, for example, from Flickr profiles, and then where were you born, where are you living, this kind of thing, and they influence what is presented during these intercultural trainings. Now we're looking at grabbing user learning styles and then seeing how we might be able to use that for adaptation upon simulators presenting text-based stuff. So previous work has been like questionnaire-based determination of learning styles, but you don't really want to induct your students in enrollment by immediately demotivating them by saying, you're welcome to the exciting world of learning, sit down and fill out these 500 questions. And you kind of need to keep checking on these things as well. So you give them a questionnaire at the start of the year, you give them a questionnaire before they start the course, check again halfway through. Well, so what you can also do is infer things from their behavior, the amount of time they visit the revision section, what they're doing on the message boards, work samples, So you can look at a lot of different kind of aspects of their behavior within your TEL system. But of course you've got your cold start problem. Where do you init all this stuff from? And of course you've got to build stuff that's kind of specific to Blackboard, which I think is pretty much now killed through the process of quiet commercial assassination, every other thing, Orbital, which is survived by being free and giving stuff away. And there are differences you see inside a particular thing when you say this is an educational setting between that and what they actually appear like in the real world. Okay, so just want to stop for a minute. I was involved in a paper in 2008 that said learning style adaptation gives you no benefit as far as competencies go, and just want to say, material in your preferred learning style enhances the satisfaction of the experience within the learning environment, okay? And, you know, your perception of the stuff that you're learning is important, okay? But there's no real evidence that says that learning styles, you know, they do better at increasing some kind of competencies and things like that. That's a kind of a tricky area, but that's, okay, so just to say at the minute, I'm not saying by doing all of this stuff, we then will make our actual competency acquirement greater or anything like that. What I'm saying is the learning experience will be richer, better. Okay? So, what are we doing with learning styles? Well, Dr. Solomon, obviously. So, Index of Learning Styles has 4 particular kinds. We've got visual versus verbal, well, they're like pictures or lots of text. Sensing versus intuitive, you know, whether or not it's kind of like, yes, tell me, versus kind of, ooh, we've got sequential versus global. Do you want to go this way, then this way, then this way, or just kind of back out and look at the whole thing? And reflective versus active. Do you want to have a lot of kind of forethought, processing, and so on, or do you just kind of go, right, I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this? And how do you check for these learning styles? Well, you ask people questions. The typical Felder-Solomon is now, I'm just going to see if I can, about 11 questions per dimension. So you have some examples up here, and you have generally 2 different answers, and they move the characteristics along an axis. I'll come to that in a second. There's some more examples. And so what you get is a map for each user as where they fall within the 2 extremes of each of these 4 characteristics. So whether they're particularly active or reflective, and in the example above, that's a more active learner, whether they're sensing or intuitive, kind of in the middle, whether they're, sorry, my screen's very small, so visual or verbal, kind of slightly more verbal, and whether they're sequential or global. So this learner shows particularly strong traits for being an active and sequential learner. Okay? So the paper is about taking a user and looking at their Twitter stream and generating a Twitter profile, and then giving that same user a Felder-Solomon test and getting some examples of their learning style. Take a classification from the Twitter profile, take the ground truth from the learning style, and go, Okay, so what we're trying to figure out here is whether or not we have a way of mining that Twitter information and it being as effective or useful in any way to inform the kind of personalization we'd be doing if we were doing learning style personalization. So rather than sitting them down, getting through these questionnaires, we'll just suck up their last 400 tweets and go, oh, okay, they're particularly sequential people. So backing off a little bit, why do people tweet? Well, there's kind of 4 main categories, depending on which of the different kind of bits of literature you follow. There's this kind of daily chatter, there's shared information, conversations, and news. And the majority of users focus on themselves. So one of the good things about looking at a tweet stream is 80% of users say, I am here, I am doing this, I am feeling this. You know, it's a kind of a broadcast of their own internal state. And if you ask users why they do it, they say, well, you know, I'm kind of keeping in touch. I'm broadcasting my status so as other people know what's going on. You know, it's kind of, they see it as a social conversation. Or they're doing it for collecting information. They're doing it in order to gather about themselves, you know, a set of information. Okay, so bearing that in mind, what happened? So we had this web-based 44 questions. So that's a generation of the Felder-Solomon ILS profile. Then there was, you know, some demographics. What's your gender, what's your age, what's your level of education, where are you? And the Twitter username. Okay, then before the Twitter API changes, which now make all of these things slightly more difficult, they crawled the tweet stream. And there's, oh, I've stepped outside of the camera feed. Oh, no, I've stepped outside my line, terrible. So, the tweet went into a preprocessor. There's a language detector. If it wasn't English, it went through the Bing translator, got tagged with NLP and WordNet to get some kind of aggregation feature extracting, and the URLs then went through a crawler they grabbed the web page that was pointing to, and again, it went through this process of aggregation and feature extraction. And they had 4 groups of features, yielding a total of 29 different features in the set as a whole. Okay? So the idea was to take the whole tweet stream and then go, right, okay, from this, what can we say about each of these features? So these 4 groups were, Twitter account, the tweet style, the semantics, and the external URLs, and whether or not there were images and so on. Classification was done with Neve buys and AdaBoost, and that's all I'm going to say about that because I'm not a classifier. But the evaluation was then done with respect to precision, recall, and cons kappa. Okay, so whether or not these things were agreeing by chance, whether or not they were kind of, yeah, okay, it's just random. Less than by chance, slight agreement, moderate agreement, or perfect agreement. So they were looking at the feature set extracted and then saying, okay, do these now match up to what we expect to find? So in the ground truth, we have this information from the Twitter study. So these are the Felder-Solomon stuff, and this says that, hey, it's fine, these BizVerb and active reflective, they're the same, but we've got some kind of problem going on with the understanding and perception when we move on to the classification results. So here we have active reflective, BizVerb, global sequential, intuitive sensing along the top. And what happens? Well, you have one set, active reflective, which is a better than random set of accuracy. But, and so here's the bad news, the other 3 were unpredictable. Okay, so they had 51 participants in total, and if we just back off so this is in the way, you can see between the recall and the Blaze boost, there is some agreement between the predictions from the feature set culled from the Twitter stream for active reflective, but the numbers are way too low for any of the other characteristics. Okay, so good news, can figure out something. Bad news, not a quarter of what maybe you'd hope. So moving on, challenges. First of all, 51 people is a really low subset to actually kind of extract this kind of information from. So maybe with a little bit more shaping, getting 500, 1,000, might be able to do a little bit better with the feature set, with the classifiers and so on. Yeah, tweets. Some people just retweet a lot. Some people don't really actually have that much in the way of actual information content in the tweets. So there's an issue with actually classifying the things that you then take into the feature set. What kind of things on Twitter? Maybe, rather than just actually looking at the features themselves, we can say a little bit more about looking in depth at the characteristics of the tweet. So rather than just doing feature analysis on the text, on the content, when the thing's tweeted, what kind of retweet stuff, maybe other characteristics of the tweets themselves might be useful for predicting these things. And, it's always good to have more complex and semantic-based stuff. Okay, so that's my presentation of their presentation. Thanks very much. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer questions because all of the answers will be in the paper that I read before I gave this presentation. So I would suggest that you read that very good paper, by the way. And one final thing, it's an IamReal project presentation. As part of the IamReal project at the moment, we're trying to understand the emotional weightings of multicons. You may have seen my several begging tweets about this. So please can you go to this link and do our survey, which just does a little bit of demographics and then asks you to rate each of 9 tweets in terms of what you actually think they mean. And so it's bit.ly with a little s, little m, and then capitals I-L-E-Y. That was the only bit.ly smiley link that was available. And please, retweet, publicize. If you can't remember this, the imaginary stand will very shortly also have the link stuck in it. So go and talk to Lucia and Antonio, who are great people anyway, and all that. Okay, so thanks very much.